voice to our mission. We have been just so appreciative of her message of love and so just grateful for her work trying to move our country in the right direction. And yes, we are thrilled to have her here with us today. And I'd love to, I should also mention that I met her for the first time in person in New Hampshire, and I felt so lucky to have my book signed. And I'm so happy to be introducing her this evening. Please join me in welcoming Marianne Williamson.
I think 2 or 3 times. It's great to be back in Fairfield always. It was a very meaningful experience for me, the time that I spent here, and something that I recognize as very profound. You feel it here in Iowa. You feel it in New Hampshire as well, I must say. And that is that the people, particularly in these 2 states, in all the early primary states, but Iowa and New Hampshire, unlike any other, for obvious reasons, you recognize the very, very serious decision that lies in your hands. And it was a privilege to be part of this. You recognize how consequential it is, possibly for the entire world. And I am grateful for the opportunity to express to you why I feel Andrew's voice deserves serious consideration. I think that if every American, the older I get, and the more involved I have been with this situation, the more I recognize the profundity of the Jeffersonian concept, that the only safe place, the only safe repository for power in the United States of America is in the hands of its people. And the concept here, which is so radical and so profound, is that if you have all the information and you have honed critical thought processes, given by free press, free flow of information, free speech, and free public education, that you and you alone, according to the dictates of your own conscience, to the dictates of your own heart, no matter where you come from or who you are, that your decision-making and your decision-making alone can be trusted as the governing power of a great country. Now, I have great respect for that process. I have great respect for the fact that you will know on February 3rd who to caucus for. I have great respect for that. One of the reasons I don't do this whole endorsement thing is because on a personal level, I don't think you need other people to tell you. But I feel that a campaign is where candidates get an opportunity to tell you what they believe and what they would do with the job, which Andrew will be doing here with you tonight. But I welcome the opportunity to tell you why I believe Andrew Yang deserves the serious consideration when you are going through all of these ideas in your own heart. But while a lot of Democrats are thinking, should we go left or should we go center? I believe that we have another decision to make, not only left versus center, and that's fresh versus stale. Yeah. Psychological and emotional issues that all of us have to think about very deeply, in addition to the issues themselves. The issues aren't always the only issue. There are deeper psychological and emotional issues. Obviously, the Democrats missed out on that last time, which is why Trump is president today. Yeah. And that has to do with the fact that you're not only choosing a nominee based on the issues, but you're choosing a nominee based on how that nominee will be perceived by the people we need to vote for us in 2020. The way I see it, there are people who love Trump, and they're going to vote for Trump no matter what. And there are people who cannot stand the agenda of Trump, and they're going to vote for the Democrat no matter what. Those 2 groups we don't even have to think about. The problem is those 2 groups are too close in number for comfort. We have to think about all the millions of people who did not vote last time, and all the millions of people, I believe, who voted for Trump but are at least uncomfortable. Now, this is what I believe with my heart. You'll have to see what is true in your heart. I do not believe that those millions of people are looking this year. It's a different time than last time. Last time, moral outrage made sense because moral outrage is not born of anger. Moral outrage is born of love. I don't believe this time, even though that the emotional tenor last time was rage, and it was legitimate rage. It was rage based on the fact that millions of people knew that the system was rigged against them. I, however, do not believe that the emotional tenor this time is rage and anger. People are afraid at this point of rage and anger. I don't believe people are angry so much as people are exhausted. I don't believe that people really want so much someone to go to Washington and fight for them as they want someone to go to Washington who can end the fighting. We are already in a cold war in this country. It is a cold civil war. And we have to think about this very, very seriously. Because we have to think about the fact that it's not only who will get elected, it's also we have to think about the person who, the day after the inauguration, how they will be treated by the rest of the country. I went through my years as an angry left-winger. And I realized that I had to evolve. I didn't have to evolve beyond my left-wing politics. I didn't have to moderate my politics, but I had to moderate my personality. I had to ask myself, isn't it possible to be a happy warrior? Isn't it possible to be a happy lefty? I didn't like what was happening to my personality. It wasn't that I needed to modify my politics, but I believe that if the Democrats, and this is why I believe that Andrew's voice is important in this race, you in Iowa are not necessarily, those who caucus in Iowa, you're not necessarily determining who's going to be president, but you are determining who's going to be an important voice in this race. To me, the reason Andrew Yang matters so much, he has three particular personality characteristics that I believe are important. His self-confidence, his positivity, and his levity. Why is it that they're important? They're important because to me they are like a tuning fork, and they take us back to an America that we all miss. I remember when America was confident in itself. I remember when an America that was positive, and I remember an America that really was sometimes more fun than it is now. And so, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else, this is what I say to you. I know Andrew Yang. I love Bernie, and I love Elizabeth, and I love a lot of those people because some of them, I got to know some of these people on the campaign trail, and some of them were very, very lovely people. But there are two other major progressives. They're going to exit Iowa. They're going to place in Iowa. They're going to place in Iowa. But we need Andrew to, if you believe that what you hear tonight, and I believe that you will, that will be up to you. But if you believe that Andrew's voice is an important part in this conversation, then you have a very important part to play. Because there's something here about presenting to the American people, not just our anger, presenting to the American people a vision that I think is extremely important. And that is that not every rich person is a greedy bastard. And not every poor person is a victim. That is a continuation of a warlike mentality. Gandhi was outraged about the British being in India, but he refused to demonize the British. And Martin Luther King was outraged about segregation, but he refused to personally demonize the segregationists. I think that Andrews is an important voice of the happy warrior. He's an important voice of progressivism that lays it down, but lays it down with joy. And I can tell you personally, from my personal experience of Andrew, if he begins in any way to veer away from the kind of progressive vision that so many of us feel is important, I promise you, he even thinks about it, I'll call him myself. God bless everybody. Ladies and gentlemen,
Ah, much better. Voice amplification. All right, third time's the charm. This one's all right. I'm all right. He knows what he's doing. Hello, Fairfield. Thank you so much, and let's give it up again for Marianne Williamson. I also occasionally get thanked for running for president, and I say, thank my wife Evelyn, because one, she let me run, and two, she's been sacrificing much more than anyone else in our family. So thank you, Evelyn. I love you so much. I love campaigning here in Iowa because you all are some of the most powerful, influential people in our country today. I know it doesn't feel like it. Most of you are just living your lives, decided to come out to a Friday night event with not one but two presidential candidates. But I did the math. Do you know how many Californians each of you is worth? About 1,000 Californians each. So look around this theater tonight. How many of us are here tonight together? I'm going to give a Trumpian estimate. There are 2,000 people here in the theater. Biggest theater anyone's ever seen. The best estimate's like there are about 250 people here. But 250 Iowans is more than 6 football stadiums full of Californians. That's the power you all have to shape the future of this country. And I appreciate Marianne's remarks so much because I feel like this country has been struggling for the last several years with a fundamental question that's confused many of us. And the question is this: why is Donald Trump our president today? Or more direct to you all, how did Donald Trump win Iowa, a purple swing state, by almost 10 points in 2016? Now, if you turned on cable news at any point in the last number of years, what answers have we been given by the media companies as to why Trump's our president?
Russian interference.
Russian interference.
Anthony Weiner.
That's the first time I've heard Anthony Weiner, but maybe. That's true. Facebook. Electoral college. Emails. Hillary Clinton. James Comey, FBI, the media again, the DNC. All sort of mixed together into some kind of potpourri of explanations. But Fairfield, I'm a numbers guy, and when I went through the numbers, there's a very clear and direct explanation as to why Donald Trump is our president today. We blasted away 4 million manufacturing jobs over the last number of years, and where were those jobs primarily located? Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, and 40,000 right here in Iowa. Now, I know Fairfield is something of an oasis of growth in the state, but I have been to the communities that lost their manufacturing jobs in Iowa, and after the plant closed, the shopping district closed, people left, the school shrank, and that community has never recovered. I saw the same pattern play out in Missouri, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. So I spent the last 7 years running a nonprofit that helped create thousands of jobs in those communities. And unfortunately, what we did to those manufacturing jobs is now shifting to other parts of the economy. Now, you all live, again, in a very prosperous part of the state, but how many of you have noticed stores closing here in Iowa? And why are those stores closing? You know, what's funny is, like, when I talk to people in the state, they know it's Amazon, but they say first it was Walmart. So we're joking that Walmart was like a tank that came to town and then mowed down the mom and pop retailers. And then now there's Amazon, which is more like a spaceship, hovering above the entire thing. Amazon sucking up $20 billion in business every year, closing 30% of our stores and malls. In our economy, the most common job is retail clerk. The average retail clerk is a 39-year-old woman making between $8 and $12 an hour. When her store closes, what is her next opportunity? How much did Amazon pay in taxes last year? Zero. So that is the math, Fairfield. 20 billion out, zero back, 30% of Iowa's stores and malls closed, the most common jobs just to disappear. Now you see these changes, everyone sees these changes in our retail districts, but the changes are more widespread and pervasive than most people think about. When you all call the customer service line of a big company and you get the bot or the software, I'm sure you do the same thing I do. which is you pound 000, say human, human, representative, representative, human, human, until you get someone on the line. Raise your hand if that's what you do. Oh yeah, we all do that. We're like, there has to be a person working at this company still, and I'm going to find that person. But in 2 or 3 short years, the software is going to sound like this. Hello, Andrew, how are you? How can I help you? What is that going to mean for the 2.5 million Americans who work at call centers right now making $10 to $14 an hour? When the software is so good, you actually can't even tell it apart from a human being. How many of you all know truck drivers here in the state, here in Iowa? It's the most common job in 29 states, and my friends in California are working on robot trucks that can drive themselves. They tell me they're 98% of the way there. A robot truck just transported 20 tons of butter from California to Pennsylvania 3 weeks ago with no human intervention. Why did they choose butter for this maiden voyage? I have no idea. But if you Google robot butter truck, you'll see the story. And then at the end of the route was a giant stack of pancakes. As far as the everything I just said strikes up the pancake. So what will the self-driving trucks mean for the 3.5 million truckers, 94% men, average age 49, or the 7 million plus Americans who work at truck stops, motels, and diners across the country? How many of you have been to Iowa 80 in Davenport? Me too. They say that 5,000 people stop there every day. How many people will stop at Iowa 80 when the trucks don't have drivers anymore?
6.
6, it's very precise. It's gonna be more than that. Now, the way Marianne talks about what's happened in our country, and I agree with her, and I actually learned from her, she's more enlightened than I am in many, many ways. She talks about this psychological and spiritual clash, and frankly, struggle and dissent that we're dealing with. I tend to think in numbers and economics. And so you have the most common jobs in our country that are getting reduced in number very sharply. And this fourth industrial revolution is now accelerating. It's taking off. I am not a career politician. Most of you have gathered that. How many of you have seen the TV ads? Well, good, because we spend a lot of money on those ads. I'm very sad. So I'm an entrepreneur and problem solver who spent years trying to create jobs in the Midwest and the South. Honored several times by the Obama administration, so I got to introduce Evelyn to the president. My in-laws were very excited about me that week. I'm like, she did all right. But unfortunately, over those years, I had this sinking feeling that my work was like pouring water into a bathtub that had a giant hole ripped in the bottom. Things were getting worse, not better, in a lot of places. And then Trump wins, and I realized that things are even worse than I'd imagined. This fourth industrial revolution is now speeding up. So I went to our leaders in DC in 2017, and I said to them, hey, we're scapegoating immigrants for problems immigrants have nothing to do with. We're going through this economic transformation that is pushing more Americans to the sidelines. What are we going to do to help our people? And what do you think the folks in DC said to me when I said, what are we going to do? Go away, who are you? Get a job. The 3 responses I got were these. Number 1, we cannot talk about this. Number 2, we should study this further. And number 3, the most popular, we must educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. How many of you have heard something like that out of a politician? Yeah, it's very popular, it's pretty responsible sounding. But I'm the numbers guy, I said, hey, I looked at the studies. You all want to guess how effective the government-funded retraining programs were for the manufacturing workers who lost their jobs in the Midwest? You know it's low because I'm anchoring you low. But you also know it's low because you know people, you know human beings. You know 500 manufacturing workers don't walk out of the factory, get laid off, and then say, good, it's time for my coding boot camp. That's not the way humans are. The success rates of those job retraining programs were 0 to 15%. They were more or less a total failure. Almost half of the manufacturing workers in these states left the workforce and did not work again. Of that group, almost half filed for disability. You then saw surges in suicides and drug overdoses to the point where America's life expectancy has now declined for the last 3 years in a row. You know the last time that happened in this country? The Great Depression is a great guess. It's a little bit earlier. It's the Spanish flu of 1918, a global pandemic that killed millions. You have to go back a century because it's highly unusual in a developed country for your life expectancy to ever go down. Ordinarily it goes up and up because you're getting richer, stronger, healthier. But out in the US, it's gone down and then down and then down again. Now, people can ascribe different causes for the deaths of despair reaching unprecedented levels. But to me, a big part of it is that many communities feel like they don't have a path forward. So when I said this to the folks in DC, one of them said, Andrew, I'll level with you. You're in the wrong town. No one here will do anything about this. Because fundamentally, Washington, DC is a town of followers, not leaders. And the only way we will do something about it is if you were to create a wave in other parts of the country and bring that wave crashing down on our heads. And I said, challenge accepted. I will be back in 2 years. So today, I stand before you in this latest poll. I was fourth to become last quarter in increments of only $35 each. So my fans are almost as cheap as Bernie's. But there was not a dime of corporate PAC money in that $16.5 million. This is an uprising, not a PAC. The government that is not working for us. Our government at this point is not working for us. What's it working for? The almighty dollar. You have record high corporate profits in this country. You know what else are record highs in the United States of America? Stress, depression, substance abuse, overdoses, student loan indebtedness, financial insecurity, suicides. If your corporate profits are going up and your life expectancy is going down, which do you listen to? Well, think about that. We know which one DC is listening to. DC can't even see people and health anymore. Washington, DC today is the richest city in our country. Think about that for a second. What do they produce? It's somewhat unclear, but whatever their business is awfully good. We have to get our own government under control. We have to restore the feedback mechanism between the people and the government. I'm for term limits of 12 years for every member of Congress. Their goal should be to go to DC, do work on our behalf, and then come home. It should not be to go there and be like, ooh, I like it here, I like it here. Let me stay. As your president a year from now, Iowa, I will get term limits passed, and here's how we'll get it done. I will walk into Congress and I'll say, hey, we need to make this place more responsive and dynamic, so we're gonna have 12-year term limits, but current lawmakers are exempt. Do you think they'll pass that? Oh, they'll pass that the next day. They'll be like, we do this for the American people. Because as long as they're exempt, they'll be like, I get to walk around like some kind of like super legislator, but then eventually they'll get phased out too, and then we'll have a legislature that actually works for us. As your president, I will pledge not to take any paid speeches for personal gain for the rest of my life. Because the fact is, these cultures get established at the top. If everyone looks around and says, well, I guess that's what we're doing, I guess giving the $250,000 speech for an hour's worth of work to the corporate client, I guess that's our way, then it's very hard to get the revolving door under control. It has to start at the top. And as president, I will say, look, like I'm not going to do anything for industry. And we have to do the same thing for regulators at the highest levels. As soon as you start working for government in DC right now, there's like a timer. It's a timer and everyone's like, ooh, when are you gonna leave? When are you gonna leave? And then they have bags of money waiting for you when you leave. There's a woman named Sheila Bair who used to run the FDIC. I don't know if you've heard of Sheila, but she got there and she said, this is not working. We have to make this a one-way trip. We have to say that if you work as a top regulator, you're not allowed to go work back in industry for at least a decade. And in return, we should compensate those people more. I think that's a very fair trade for a government that we can actually trust. Now, if we're here today and you heard Caroline mention, and Evelyn, I think maybe even Marianne, my flagship proposal is that we should be giving every American $1,000 a month starting at age 18. And I know even to you in Fairfield, even though you're very, very enlightened and optimistic in this place, it still might seem like a gimmick, too good to be true, like might not be feasible. Raise your hand if you actually had that reaction. No one here is willing to call. Oh, a few people, that's good. Again, I know this is a very, very optimistic group. But even in a bastion of optimism like this town, you might think, wow, that seems awfully dramatic. This is not my idea, and it's not a new idea. Thomas Paine was for this at the founding of our country. He called it the citizens' dividend for all Americans. Martin Luther King, whose birthday we celebrated this week, was fighting for this in the 1960s, the guaranteed minimum income, and it is what he was fighting for when he was killed in 1968. I know this in part because I met with Martin Luther King's son in Atlanta, and he said this is what his father was fighting for. 1,000 economists endorsed it in the 60s. It came this close to being law throughout the entire country in 1971. And then 11 years later, one state passed a dividend where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that? Alaska. And how does Alaska pay for it? Oil. And what is the oil of the 21st century? Technology, data, AI, self-driving cars and trucks. A study just came out that said that our data, your data, is now worth more than oil. How many of you saw that study? How many of you got your data check in the mail last month? If your data is now worth billions of dollars a year and you are not seeing any of it, where is that money going? Amazon, Facebook, Google, Apple, the mega tech companies that are paying zero or near zero in taxes. What we have to do, what you have to do on February 3rd, is say that all this value that's leaving your communities needs to come back, and we need to put it in your hands in the form of this dividend. Build a trickle-up economy from our people, our families, and our communities up. Particularly because when this money is in your hands, where will it go? How would you spend it?
Community.
How much of it would stay right here in Iowa?
A lot.
Most of it, not all of it. You might get your own Netflix password. But most of it would go to car repairs you've been putting off, and daycare expenses, and Little League signups, and local nonprofits, and arts, and culture, and religious organizations. This is an economy that will work for our people. And this is vital in part because it has been trending the other direction for decades. How many of you all are parents like me and Marianne and Evelyn? If you're a parent, you probably have had this sinking feeling that the future we're leaving our kids is less stable, less secure, and less prosperous than the lives that we have led as their parents. And you tend to think of that as climate change, which is a very, very real freight train bearing down on us. But it's also true in terms of their way of life. If you were born in the 1940s in the United States of America, there was a 93% chance you were going to do better than your parents. That's the American dream. That's what brought my family here, Evelyn's family here. That's what we aspire to leave to our kids. But if you were born in the 1990s in this country, you're down to a 50-50 shot, and it's declining fast. That is why the parents feel the way we do. That is why Trump won this place by almost 10 points. Because when people look up and they do not actually feel optimistic about their future, their kids' future, they're willing to go to very, very great lengths to try and make changes to the system. What we have to do is solve the problems that got Donald Trump elected in the first place. We shouldn't act like he is the cause, he's a symptom, and we need to cure the underlying disease. So we have record high corporate profits, but also record high levels of social problems and substance abuse. Record lows in this country right now. Starting a business for a young person, getting married, having children. The economic indicators are not telling us how we are doing. And I know how flawed they are in part because of my family and Evelyn's work at home. Evelyn most days is at home with our two boys, one of whom is autistic. How much is her work valued at in our economic measurements today?
Zero.
Evelyn and every stay-at-home parent gets a 0. How about caregivers taking care of ailing loved ones?
Zero.
0. How about volunteers and activists? Zero. Coaches and mentors trying to help the next generation?
Zero.
Most artists, I hate to say it. One thing that you don't think about, how about local journalists? Almost 2,000 local newspapers have gone out of business in the last number of months because all their revenue went up to the cloud. You know what doesn't function well if you don't have local news? Democracy. It's very hard to vote on what's going on in your town if no one's actually covering what's going on in your town. And we're up to 200 counties that don't have a single local paper. These are the things that we claim to value most in our country. our families, our communities, our democracy, and they're getting zeroed out one by one by one. And they're getting zeroed out because we have been confused that economic value and human value are somehow the same things. And what you have to say loud and clear on February 3rd is that they are not the same things, that we all have intrinsic value as Americans and as human beings ourselves. This is the human-centered economy that will actually take our country forward. Imagine a country where parents could look their kids in the eyes and say, our country loves you, your country values you, and your country will invest in you. People know when they're investing in you and when they're not. People can tell when you're paying lip service or when you mean it. And right now our kids sense that we do not mean it, because nothing is an actual investment more than actual resources that they can use to make their own choices. And I love Marianne's message about you have the government and then the people, and you need to have power to the people and equip people to make their own decisions. I could not agree more. We have to have the government put us in position to have our people, our families, and our communities thrive. But we're in the midst of the most historic winner-take-all economy in the history of our country. And the dynamics are accelerating in unprecedented ways. I have seen it. I am friendly with some of the most powerful technologists in our country, and they tell me, I've been in the lab with the artificial intelligence. When it comes out, it's going to be more disruptive than anyone believes. They never say to me, I've been with the artificial intelligence guys in the labs, and everything's going to be exactly the same. That's at the end of that thought. We all know our government is decades behind the curve in many respects, but it's particularly behind the curve on technology. I can say this with precision because we got rid of the Office of Technology Assessment in 1995, 25 years ago. So Congress has literally been getting zero independent advice on technology for 25 years. Isn't that great timing? Because nothing's really happened in 25 years. And one of the things that on a personal level, as a parent, I think is troubling about technology is its effect on the mental health of our kids and our young people. I was a very nerdy, introverted kid, but when I went home and I shut the door, I felt like I could be alone. But today, that kid, when they shut the door, they feel like their classmates are all in the room with them because they can just take their phone out and see exactly what everyone's thinking and saying. The problems of anxiety and depression we've seen in young people have been very, very much in lockstep with the adoption of smartphones and social media apps. And you know who do not let their kids use these devices? The people in Silicon Valley. You ever want to go someplace where it's like a screen-free environment? Just go to Silicon Valley and you'll see that they don't let their kids touch these things. And one of my friends in Silicon Valley, Tristan Harris, put it like this. He said, we have the smartest engineers in our country turning supercomputers into dopamine delivery devices for teenagers. And they're making millions of dollars doing it. As your president, I will appoint Tristan to actually get into the guts of these companies and start recalibrating the design choices they're making to prioritize the mental health of our kids over the profits of these companies. I can't wait for that to happen. It's going to be really funny because right now the tech companies are like, there, Tristan. They're like, there. I can't wait until I have to answer to him. That's going to be a very, very happy day. Well, what's happened in that space is emblematic of what's gone on throughout our country writ large. If you have people on one side and money on the other, who wins? The money. You can see it very, very, very easily. It's like the pharma companies, they win. The banks, they win. The tech companies, they win. Military-industrial complex, they win. This is what we have to change. We have to reverse the tide, and it's going to happen here in Iowa on February 3rd. And I say to the folks here in Iowa, you all have been the epicenter of this. This is why this is such a crucial battleground. Trump winning by almost 10 points is because this transformation has already been sweeping your state. It started on your farms with the consolidation of many of the farms and the mechanization of a lot of those agricultural jobs. Then it shifted to your factories, wiping out 40,000 manufacturing jobs and counting, devastating those towns. Now it's on your main streets, closing 30% of the stores and malls. We have to stop it before it hits your highways. Time is not our friend on this. If we wait another 4 years, what happens over those 4 years? Lights go out, the AI gets smarter, the robot trucks get closer to the highways. This is it. This is where humanity actually turns the tide. This is where we start winning against the money. Donald Trump's our president today because he had a very clear message that many of your neighbors understood. He said he was going to make America great again. What did Hillary Clinton say in response?
Yeah.
America's already great. You remember that, Fairfield? It's been a long 3 years. But it's now coming to an end. That response did not go over well with many people because the problems are real. We have to acknowledge their reality and depth and severity, but then we need real solutions that will actually move our country forward. What were Donald Trump's solutions? Build a wall, turn the clock back, bring the old jobs back. Fairfield, you know more than anyone, we have to do the opposite of these things. We have to turn the clock forward. We have to accelerate our economy and society to rise to the real challenges of this era, like climate change. We have to evolve in the way we see ourselves and our work and our value. I am the ideal candidate for this job because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. Thank you very much.
If you'd like to ask a question, there is a mic right over there. We only have time for a few, but if you'd like to ask a question, you can head right over to stage right.
Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to Fairfield, both of you. My name is Anil Maheshwari. I work at the Maharshi University, part of the enlightened community that you've come to. So we're very grateful you've come. You must have been wonderful. My question, I'm actually originally a Tulsi fan. She's like you and a friend of all of you, both of you. And we care in this place a lot about world peace. And you mentioned in passing military-industrial complex. What would you work on towards ending the wars, or the kind of message that about ending sort of the regime-changing wars, which take a lot of the money that you said could come back to communities and build all the infrastructure, education, health?
Well, thank you for the question. I have signed a pledge to end the forever wars. 75% of Americans want nothing to do with war with Iran. So why are we at the brink of war with Iran? It's because Congress has ceded its constitutional authority to declare war to the executive branch for 19 years and counting, and so we've been in a constant state of conflict ever since. I would tear up the AUMF, say to Congress, the Constitution says it's up to you to declare war, so you should exercise that power. It should not be up to the executive. I would then invest in diplomacy and our partnerships, let Iran and the rest of the world know that we do not want to have anything to do with provoking or initiating a conflict. Let our allies know we're open for business, and then take some of the $6 trillion and counting we spent in the Middle East and the $1 trillion plus in Iraq alone, and spend it on making ourselves stronger and more secure against the real threats of this era, like climate change. And this is one thing, I just talked to a guy named Dr. Perry today about the fact that there's a much higher risk of us initiating an accidental nuclear war than there should be. And so I would adopt a no first use policy, and then I would change the process so it's not one human being who's turning a key and then everyone else has to say, let's do this as fast as possible. There should be many more fail-safes in place to make sure that no one sets off Armageddon unwittingly. So no first use policy, genuine fail-safes, all the way up to including some sort of approval process so I can't do, or as your president, even if I wanted to, which I never would, that like I would need to get buy-in from all sorts of people to do something that might change the fate of the world.
Hi, my name's Nathaniel. I've grown up here in Fairfield. And first of all, I just want to thank you for giving all of us Asian Americans a voice on the national stage. So you had mentioned climate change as a very, very big problem in the modern day world. But I feel like I'm speaking for a lot of us younger voters here that your record on climate change has not necessarily been the greatest. In fact, as you're a numbers guy, the Center for Biological Diversity Action gave you a rating of 2 out of 10. Now, I'm sure you know, as well as me, if I came home with a 2 out of 10 on a scorecard, I wouldn't be having dinner or something like that. But the two things that you
Is that an Asian joke?
The two things that you scored well were to end new federal fossil fuel leasing, as well as require zero-emission cars by 2030. But you didn't say that you would declare a national climate emergency. You would not phase out all existing fossil fuel production. You would not end fossil fuel exports, ban fracking nationwide, prosecute big polluters in court, etc. What can you do right now on the campaign trail and even in office as president to make sure that the climate becomes better, make sure that we as the younger generation have a place to live in the world?
Well, thank you for the question, man. I believe climate change is the existential threat to our way of life. And our plan has us going to zero emissions over the next 29 years, which is, to me, a very, very aggressive timeline.
We don't have 29 years.
Well, no,
The UN has already...
Hear it out. The fact is, the United States of America is 15% of global emissions. The other 85% is in the rest of the world. Now, what's happening in the rest of the world is that China is going to African governments and saying, hey, coal burning plant, do you like it? And what does the African government say? Yeah, thank you. So what do we need to do to try and get that to change? We need to go to that African government and say, don't take the coal burning power plant, take these solar panels instead, and we will subsidize them to a very high level. We should be taking out all the subsidies we put to fossil fuel companies and give them to renewable energy companies. But one of the things, we should put a tax on pollution day one. But the reality is that if a politician says we need to prevent climate change, what's wrong with that statement? We're already on the curve. Like, the last 4 years have been the 4 warmest years in recorded history. The floods are here. We all saw the photos. I mean, the Australian photos of this fire, they're like science fiction nightmare movies come to life. So at this point, we need to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in making our economy, not our economy, our towns and communities and families safer, stronger, more resilient, more adaptive, because it's here. We can't leave people on their own. We should be investing right now in the disasters that we know are on the way. So I agree we need to transition, but the reality is that we are not in a position now where even if we were to zero out our emissions over the coming years, like, the climate's going to warm. The sea levels are going to rise. It's already happening, and we need to start actually investing in making ourselves safer and not pretend we can prevent something that has unfortunately been decades in the making.
But as president, there is a very simple thing you could do even in office on the first day. You don't need Congress's permission to declare a international climate emergency. Are you willing to do that? Because according to the CB, the Center for Biological Diversity Action, you aren't.
I am 100% willing to declare a international climate emergency if I believe it's helpful in speeding us towards the goals.
Hi, my name is Cheyenne Holiday, and I own a vegan community event center, animal rights center, restaurant, art gallery, and theater right across the street in the old Orpheum Theater building. Thanks.
Do you want to give a plug for it? What's the name of it?
Plant. We're open. We actually shut down to come to this.
Wait. Does this mean that you're going to open immediately afterwards and then everyone's going to go there and eat?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
I love it.
But Marianne actually already spoke there about a month ago, and we were really honored to host her. But I understand that the final CNN town hall was canceled, so candidates aren't about to have an opportunity to finally speak and have a final forum before the caucus. Conveniently, the 1st and 2nd, we are hosting the first, I guess it'd be quad annual, Ascension and Action Conference, which is a 2-day conference to raise the collective consciousness and the collective understanding about the candidates and about ourselves while we're going into the caucus, so that we're able to go into it with the highest possible mindset. Now, I'd like to invite both of you to this conference to speak on the first day, where we'd like to host a presidential open forum so that you're able to get in your final words and directly speak to people right before the caucus.
Oh, I love this. What are the dates on this?
The 1st and 2nd of February. The 1st is when we want to have the forum.
Well, I'll have to talk to my team because I might already have some stuff scheduled, but if I'm free, I'm there because that sounds awesome. I think we all benefit from trying to access higher levels of consciousness and sensitivity, so thank you.
And Marianne?
February 1st, I have to be in New York, and I actually think for that, I think the candidates are really actually.
Beautiful. Okay, well, I'll talk to your team and I hope to see you there. And I hope to see everyone at Plant after this.
Go to Plants! Go to Plants! Yes.
Hi, my name is Stephen Tolpenrud. Thank you for showing up here tonight. Really appreciate what you folks have done, especially for the national discourse on some really important issues. I have another, well, it's related to climate change question. I think, and I was actually reading an article this morning by the UN Rapporteur to the Right to Food, and he was referencing a statistic that roughly 32% of all global emissions are produced because of agricultural practices, and that just encompasses just like the production and transportation and allocation of food. That doesn't include deforestation. And so I'm just curious, given that agriculture plays such a large role, and I'm just curious if you have any policy positions that you're going to put into place when you become president.
I love this question so much, and as a parent too, Evelyn and I talk about it, where food production has become something that's central to more and more of our lives, because there's this sense that this industrial food production is changing the composition of our foods in ways that are bad for the environment, but also are affecting our health in some ways that I'm not even sure we're fully cognizant of. So I would love, as president, to get into what would help make it more environmentally sustainable. And I think, oh yeah, please.
Tell them the first day you're going to fire Sonny Perdue, and he will no longer be the Secretary of Agriculture.
Oh yeah, that's his own line.
That Francis Thickey, people like that, that your friend Marianne keeps calling you, and that the government should have these mentors in regenerative agriculture. And it would take them a few years to make the money, but that'll be okay because you're going to help advocate for the farmer against the conglomeratization of agriculture.
I love it. I think I know who we're gonna replace Sonny Perdue with. No, we'll have a different job in the administration. I mean, you have a bigger footprint than agriculture. I understand. Thank you.
Because the thing is, Andrew, as you well know, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but I think it's important that everybody here is aware of how much you know. is that whether you're talking about Raytheon and Northrop Grumman and Boeing and the military-industrial complex domination, so that we have hundreds of billions of dollars more spent in our military budget than the military even asks for in order to keep us safe, that it is a corporate matrix, whether you're talking about the military-industrial complex or the agricultural-industrial complex, or the big pharmaceutical complex, or health insurance companies. It's all part of the same corporate matrix, correct?
I couldn't agree more. This campaign's about humans versus the machine. And the machine, it can be the agricultural conglomerates, it can be the military-industrial complex, it can be the big pharma. We have to have humans win, am I right? Yeah. To say, Marianne has helped me be more human. She's one of the most human people I know, so thank you, Marianne.
I'd like to say something about Andrew right now about that. You know, Andrew talks about humanity first, and I think that in the 21st century, we are living at a time where we are moving from a transactional to a relational way of being. And we need to move from a transactional to a relational way of leadership. And this is one of the reasons why I think Andrew is the person for the job. Because there is a transactional politics that is part of the Democratic and Republican establishment. And even the best people are stuck within that box. And I have witnessed and I've experienced and I've been the beneficiary of the fact that Andrew does not think about political issues just in terms of, you talk about math and you talk about intellectually figuring these things out, which no one does better than you. But I've known you to be someone who will stand in the moment and really listen to the person in front of you and allow what in Fairfield we can understand is so profound, the organic flow of wisdom that is emerging from that moment. And I believe with the chaos that is coming in the 21st century, with the chaos that is already here, nothing is more important than that we have a leader who can stand within the space of what is happening and respond not only from your head, but from your heart.
Marianne Williamson again. Marianne, you're stuck with me the rest of this campaign. I'm kidding. I said I should never do an event without you again, and you're stuck with me for the duration of the campaign.
Andrew, last question. I hope that part of your policy will be the labeling and testing of these horrible genetically modified organisms that are plaguing our country and causing a lot of the problems with our kids. But my question... My question is that you have nailed the reason Trump got elected and the huge problems facing us, and I think that the $1,000 a month is a great step in the right direction, but obviously $1,000 a month isn't enough. And so what's the rest of the answer for the future, for this new industrial revolution that you've talked about that's coming, that's going to unemploy so many people?
Well, thank you. So first, I'm 100% for labeling what's in our food, including genetically modified organisms, for people to know what they are. I'll have to look into that. I'm not, it's like... No, you're right about the economic issues, and $1,000 a month is not a cure-all. It doesn't solve everything. But a lot of this is the fact that our economy right now is not even designed to make us healthier, more prosperous. It's designed to do what? Maximize the bottom line of these companies. And so if we look at GDP, this 100-year-old measurement that even the inventors said 100 years ago, this is a terrible measurement of national well-being, we should never use it as that, and say, okay, this is one interesting data point, but you know what's more interesting? Our health and life expectancy. Yeah. Our mental health and freedom from substance abuse. Clean air and clean water. Childhood success rates. Proportion of Americans who can retire in quality circumstances. I would actually make these the measurements of the economy that we report every single quarter. And then I would report them to us every year at the State of the Union, I'd be the first president to use a PowerPoint deck and have these data points. But every organization makes what it measures. And so right now, one of the reasons we're losing is because we've collectively brainwashed our Americans to think we all work for the economy. And we have to say the economy works for us. It's not that we work for the machines work for us. So if it's all working for us, then we have to figure out whether we are actually reaping the benefits of being the wealthiest country in the history of the world. And as soon as you had these measurements, you would see we're in a mental health crisis. We're in a wellness depression. We're in a civic engagement depression. Like all of the measurements that you care about as a normal social human being or a parent are going their opposite direction. So as soon as you see that these are the problems, then you can start putting energies towards solving them. And so if you're a local entrepreneur or a nonprofit or an organization that can actually improve our kids' educational outcomes or health outcomes or mental health, then you actually get economically rewarded for that because those are the new measurements of the economy. And if you have this as your barometer, then one of the first things you do is you pay school teachers more because every school teacher is driving educational results for dozens of kids. So this is the framing that we have to change. And I said before that women are going to have to lead the way in this new economy. Because if you actually have the purpose of the economy to be our well-being, then you know that it's women that are most naturally leading in that work in many of our communities already. And so we need to actually make that the pillar instead of what it is right now, which is sort of an add-on. And I have to say to the women who are in these corporate environments, what's the argument that companies make for treating women well? We'll make more money if you're in senior leadership. And then the argument has to be like, that's not the reason you treat women well. You know, it's like you have to have women leaders because you have to have women leaders because that's just the right thing to do. It's not because, like, if in another world you didn't make more money if you had women leaders, would you just not want them? So this is like it's like the inversion of our current economics, essentially, where instead of having our humanity be subservient to the capital efficiency, we have to make the capital efficiency subservient to our own well-being. Yeah. But I'm happy to say we can make a lot of progress on this very quickly just by changing the measurements, and I don't need Congress to do that. It's the Bureau of Economic Analysis. I'll just go down the street, or as the president, I'll make them come to me, and then we'll change the measurements, and then all of a sudden we'll see how people are doing. And can you imagine a society where you actually are told Iowa's life expectancy, mental health, like all these things got better, and that's the focus? That's the way it will be after I am your president in 2021.
Team, subscribe for more of these type of videos.